Welcome to the Workology podcast, where we discuss the science and art of the workplace, gain powerful insights, resources, and perspectives on the industries of human resources and recruiting. Join your host, Jessica Miller-Merrill, chief blogger of bloggingforjobs.com, for an in-depth and no-holds-barred look into the future of our most powerful business asset, the employee. And now, welcome your host, Jessica, with this podcast episode of Workology.
Over the last couple months, on previous episodes of the podcast, we've talked about using social media and other tools to build a personal brand. And you might remember that we've discussed strategies to using tools like LinkedIn to create or elevate your own brand. The bigger question is really, how do we go about this? And I'm excited to talk to Eric today. He is someone who has done that. He has built a successful personal brand with social media and also a professional one with some of the biggest brands in the business. I'd like to welcome to the Workology podcast, Eric Tong. Eric, welcome.
Hey, Jessica. Thanks so much for having me on.
Let's talk a little bit about your background and then walk us through how you got involved in this crazy world of social media.
Sure, definitely. 2005, I was a senior at the McCombs School of Business at the University of Texas at Austin. And the University of Texas was the 13th campus that Facebook opened up to. At the time, it was thefacebook.com. And UT was the first non-Ivy League school that Facebook opened up to. So I signed up like a lot of other people did. At the time, I was I want to say probably a junior or senior in marketing, getting my BBA. And so, it just really kind of changed the way that people connected with each other. And I kind of took that and ran with it. So I had a couple jobs out of college that were a little bit more sales-based. I guess my first one was with Newell Rubbermaid, obviously with they do Rubbermaid containers and Sharpies and things like that. And then I actually left that position to do some marketing for a political campaign in Connecticut. So the year was 2006. It was a statewide office for U.S. Senate. And it was one of the first times I'd ever seen any campaign use social and digital to do as much as we did. I mean, we had events where we needed to get people rallied up together, and we would put out a request on Facebook, and we'd get 300 or 400 people to show up the next day. So I'd never seen anything like that before, and that really kind of affected the way that I valued social moving forward. So going forward from there, I worked at a couple energy companies, a couple software companies, and even an HR services company. And my most recent position was with BMC Software, where I really helped to lead the social media marketing group and how to get that off the ground. In the last year or so there, I worked pretty much exclusively with the recruiting department and how to increase our employer brand, establish an employee value proposition, and really just kind of show how BMC life is to the outside world. So, BMC is a 35-year-old company. They are kind of regarded as, a competitor to IBM. And so in a lot of cases, people kind of expect them to be a little bit stuffy, a little bit old-fashioned, a little bit conservative. So we went all out. We went all out on social to kind of talk about who we are, some of our exciting office spaces, and so on. So that's really how I got started into social and how I've evolved that career path over time.
And I first connected with you years and years ago on Twitter, probably 2008. And for me, that's been a really great place to, it's just crazy. Some of the relationships, my best relationships and best friendships and personal and professional connections have come from Twitter. Do you feel that way also?
Yeah, exactly. One of, let's see, I'd say in 2011, I went to my first social media conference. And I noticed that a lot of the people who were speaking and a lot of the people who were, kind of thought leaders in the space were really engaging. They had lots of followers, they had lots of tweets, everything they said got retweeted a lot. So I went on and started searching for lists of people to follow, and I came on a list of the top chief marketing officers on Twitter. And one of the guys I followed was Ted Rubin. And since then, I've met him, a handful of times, and we've been able to go out to dinner and chat about different topics. So yeah, I mean, Twitter, I think, is huge, especially when it comes to live events, any types of conferences you go to, and so on. But really, it's I think on Twitter, you're a little bit more willing to connect with people than on a lot of the other platforms. So, it's okay to follow someone versus, requesting a Facebook friend or connecting on LinkedIn. So you can be a little bit more out there, and you can kind of put yourself out there a little bit more on Twitter. So I do like it for that reason, exactly.
And I love that, you're saying that you met Ted in 2011, but you've been on Twitter prior to that, like 3 or 4 years. So it's something that you don't have to be at all the conferences to be able to build your brand and build those relationships with.
Exactly. And there are people and companies who will, skip going to conferences, but still kind of insert themselves into the stream, right? They want to be relevant. They want to learn some of the information, and they want to kind of do some digital networking. So you can hop on a hashtag and find out, who are the big movers and shakers on that hashtag, connect with them, see if, you can provide any types of services to them, if you guys can collaborate, whatever the case is. But, you really don't even have to be at some of these conferences sometimes anymore. Obviously, the face-to-face is always a huge thing. But if you, aren't able to make it because of scheduling or budgeting, then you can, virtually be there as well. So.
Let's talk a little bit about personal brand building for the audience here. Is there a secret sauce to building your personal brand with social media? And then where do you suggest that people start?
I think there's lots of different moving pieces to personal brand building on social. And, a lot of people have kind of their own particular space, right? So maybe it's like Sue Zimmerman, who's on Instagram, or Viveka Van Rosen, who's on LinkedIn. So got Carlos Gill, obviously, is kind of the Snapchat guy. So part of it might be finding your space and where you feel most comfortable, and working with people within that space, right? There are lots and lots of bloggers out there as well. So maybe if you don't have your own space, if there's lots of people you think on Instagram already, for example, you might start your own blog and really just kind of get your viewpoint out there from that perspective. A lot of it is also, being willing to network, being willing to connect. If you are one of these people who's on Twitter and you have a private account that you have to authorize people to view your tweets, then maybe Twitter is not going to be the best place for you, or you might want to rethink your strategy on that. So, I think the key is really to, find out what channels you're best at, and then also to, really work on that. Additionally, I would say, especially when you're just starting out on personal branding, professional branding on social, try and see if you can get all of your handles the same. So that really helps out a lot. So for example, I'm Eric T. Tong on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Instagram, Snapchat, Pinterest, Tumblr, WordPress, MySpace. What am I forgetting here? YouTube, Vimeo. So, when people go and search for Eric T. Tong, they know who they're getting, they know who they're connecting with. There's a couple people out there who are, they have multiple different handles. Some of them do it intentionally for branding purposes. So, for example, like Ted Rubin, who we talked about, has like 3 or 4 different Twitter handles, depending on the types of business he's trying to promote. Is it a book? Is it related to his book? Is it related to one of his companies or something? So that might make sense. But if you're just one person, in a lot of cases, you can, try and kind of standardize that Twitter handle or that social handle, so that you can get kind of that brand recognition across the board. The other thing is, in that similar vein, have a standard headshot, right? Make it. I personally like having kind of a fun headshot. So you'll always see kind of quirky ones with me, but try and kind of have a standard look and feel to your headshots. some of the different channels like, Tumblr or Twitter give you a little bit more free reign when it comes to adjusting colors and so on. But, try and have kind of a similar look and feel so that people know who you are when you're establishing that brand. You can imagine where, like, if Ford or MasterCard or Verizon had different colors and logos all over the place, it just wouldn't make too much sense, right? So if you want to build a strong personal brand, then you have to take that to the next level too, in having similar graphics as well.
How much time do you suggest that people spend daily on their personal brand? Because I think that's the hardest part. Like working in a corporate environment, you want to be a thought leader, you want to be part of the conversation, but you have responsibilities from the beginning to the end of the day.
So a lot of it really kind of depends on who you work for and how much free reign they give you. So for example, one of my friends who recently came to BMC did so because his former employer really kind of stifled his own brand, right? They wanted everything to be published under them, and they wanted everything to be approved as well. So they come over to BMC, and we had a little more leeway in that. So if you own your own company, that does give you a lot better leeway as well. You have a lot more time and a lot more availability to promote your own brand in that way. So a week and a half ago, 2 Fridays ago, I actually parted ways with my old employer. And one of the things that I used to do there was I kind of put some official rules on myself, right? So I did have some influencer relationships with various companies. A few of them gave me, free product for reviews or that kind of thing. So I would make sure that those were only posted outside of business hours, for example. Right. So I just wanted to make sure that there was no kind of, overlapping time on that or anything like, I just wanted to make sure that it was really clear that my business day was dedicated to my full-time employer, and anything else I would do was on the weekends or on the evenings. So I would actually even take off time to go to events sponsored by these companies. So some of these companies would send me out to, like future type events, trends and that kind of thing. And they actually would help my job. But from the perspective of my employer, it might not look very good if I'm getting a free trip out of something from another company. So I would officially take the time off as vacation time to go do those types of things. So overall, I would just say, see how much time you have available for it, but do try and dedicate some time toward it. A personal brand is kind of like a fire extinguisher. Like, you don't want to wait until you need to use it to have one, right? So you don't want to be laid off, you don't want to be fired, and not have that network and not have that personal brand built up so that you can reach out and talk to people and really, be able to quickly connect with someone that can either place you somewhere or work with someone else in your network in that way. So, make sure that you do take the time to go out there and, play around with your images, play around with your handles, and if you have a website, work on that. And, it doesn't have to be 2 hours every single day. It could be, a half hour every week, but just, make sure you get some time to establish a voice in the industry, to, connect with people, to network, and to, make sure you can build up that kind of a network around you.
Outside of time commitments, and I hear this a lot, they'll say like, wow, I really love what you're writing, or, it's great that you got to speak at this conference. I could never do that. And I don't believe that is the case. So I want to talk about personal barriers to social media and maybe some things that you see that might be holding people back from really putting themselves out there and being a thought leader in the space and contributing to the conversation.
Yeah, I would take a look at that and figure out, if your company has maybe a social media policy, and see how restrictive that is. So I actually wrote a social media policy at the company I worked at, 3 companies ago. And it turned out that we made the social media policy way too restrictive. and it said, don't do this, don't do that, you can get in trouble for this. And we had everyone sign it, and it turns out that a lot of people just kind of said, well, they just kind of threw their hands up and said, I don't want to do anything on social at all because I don't want to get in trouble. So as a company, if you're in charge of the social media at a company, make sure it is very welcoming and open, because even on a B2B perspective, there are companies now that are really using social as a means to get more information. So IBM did a survey in 2013 of 1,000 B2B buyers, and a third of them were already using social to make purchasing decisions, and 75% said that they would within the next year. So this is, obviously enterprise level B2B type purchases, and they're on social. So take a look at your social media policy and see if you have that flexibility to go out and kind of establish your own brand. And then, if you can, or even if they say you can't, try and see if you might be able to work with people within the organization to start up your own voice, right? So if you worked in, for example, B2B enterprise software like I did, you could have your own blog still that's blessed by the company, that's approved, and that you can kind of manage on your own, right? So you can develop your voice as a subset of the company voice still. And, it could be a blog, it could be some sort of podcast, and as long as you work with people within the company, and you have that approval, then you can kind of build one within the other and spend your company time on that. Make sure that you do have a clear plan of action in case you guys part ways. A lot of times the blogs and the videos might stay up as part of the company, and you probably want it to stay up there, to stay up anyway, just because it gives you that history and it gives you that experience, and it shows the amount of time that you've spent on that. But also, make sure that you know whether the company owns a Twitter handle, for example, that you might have started to promote a blog or a podcast. So, definitely take a look at some of the policies, sit down with your social media people, or your marketing people or your legal people, and just kind of hash out where your brand can fit into the company brand if it has to be that way.
Well, let's take a little bit of a reset here. This is Jessica Miller-Merrill, and you're listening to the Workology podcast, powered by Blogging for Jobs. Today we're talking with Eric Tong, and we're talking about social media, transparency, and empowering and igniting your personal brand. And you can follow Eric on Twitter at Eric T. Tong, T-U-N-G. All right, let's talk a little bit about transparency.
Sure.
And being your whole authentic self on social media. I think a lot of people think it can be really scary, but do you think that there's a place for transparency as an individual, and can it be used to grow your personal brand?
I think so, and I think it's really refreshing when you see that, right? So live video has really taken off within just the last year, and I think it's because you have that transparency. You can't, have your corporate video department produce something that goes on Snapchat or right? So it makes it a lot more authentic and a lot more you. One of the first things I did when I found out that I was laid off was I wrote a LinkedIn blog post, a Pulse post, and I also had a Facebook live video. And it was a couple of reasons that I did that. So the first, obviously, was to just get the word out and say, hey, I'm on the job market. Take a look at me. Here's a little bit of my experience. Here's what's going on. But the second thing was it was almost therapeutic in a way too, right? So I work with a nonprofit called Journal to Save Your Life. And right now we're in the very first stages of funding. So if you want to take a look at journaltosaveyourlife.org, or Google for it, you can find our Indiegogo campaign. But basically the idea there is that it's a 52-week writing and art-based program for young women, young men, and boys and girls who have depression, anxiety, PTSD, who've gone through traumatic experiences, all those types of people who need to really kind of figure out who they are. And there's a lot of research that shows that writing and posting really gets that out there. Even if you don't share it, if you put something down on paper, if you talk about it, if you put it out there into the world, your own anxiety and your own depression goes down. So that's really what I did, was posting on LinkedIn and on Facebook. It was really kind of therapeutic in that way, that I was just able to get that information out there. Also, I just, it's really just second nature to me. So social isn't just a place for me. It's also been my job for the last 8 years. So it's almost second nature for me to just turn on the camera and start talking and, tell people what's going on. So I had a video. I actually, the Facebook Live video, it was only like 15 or 20 minutes worth. I actually ended up crying in it. I didn't think I wasn't expecting to, but I was just thinking about all the different people I had worked with and all the different projects, and I probably won't see a lot of these people again. And I just got a little bit emotional about it. One of my friends said it was a little bit like Leave Britney Alone, like from way back when YouTube started. But I think that kind of authenticity really shows potential employers and also other people within your network who you really are. People don't like the highly polished, highly produced type of content anymore, because it comes off as being kind of fakey, right? I mean, you see all the like reality TV shows, and then it comes out that, like for example, on The Bachelor, they said that they have 3 or 4 camera angles in every scene. So with if they kiss, then they can make the kiss look like 3 different kisses, or they can make the kiss look like it was 3 times longer. And so, obviously, there's lots of different kinds of camera tricks and things that you can do with editing that you can't do when you're live, when you're trying to be authentic and when you're trying to be your real self. So, it was really about just kind of getting out there, telling people what's going on, but also, being who I am, really.
And if you want to see the responses that Eric has got, I did watch the Facebook video. We're friends on Facebook, although we've never met in real life. I know Eric, and I follow him on social media through his daily life, just like many others do. But check out on Twitter the hashtag Hire Eric, and you can see all the conversations happening and people in support of Eric and his looking for his new opportunity, wherever it will lead him, which I think is really, like you said, like refreshing. And you can see that it's, in my mind, and I think in Eric's mind too, is a positive experience, not a negative one.
Definitely.
So before we conclude the podcast here, can you take us through and give us maybe one personal branding tip or social media tip that they can take with them and apply maybe in the next 24 hours?
I would say make movements towards starting a blog. Whether it is partnering with someone, so maybe somebody that writes for Inc. or Forbes or HuffPost or something like that, or if you have your own website, I think a blog is really the best way to get that information out there, right? Have a different viewpoint in the world that you can talk about and that you can promote, and that really gives you the best opportunity when it comes to finding a job. My cousin was just graduated from Berkeley this year, and I was telling her, she was graduating with a degree in public health, right? And think about the last couple of years. We've had lots of different public health scares, right? Right now we've got Zika. A couple of years ago we had Ebola. There's always something going on that you can write about when it comes to public health, whether it is the nurse that was being quarantined in New Jersey. Like, there's lots of different things that you can say about just what's going on. And, take that from your own perspective and get a viewpoint out there. And I think that's one of the things that a lot of people are looking for when it comes to hiring these days, is that if you have 2 people that are relatively on par with each other in a hiring context, and one of them has a blog where they talk about things that are interesting and relevant to the industry and the other person doesn't, then the person with the blog's obviously going to get the job, right? If they don't, if they're not putting out, crazy ideas or anything. But, a blog and a website really do help to establish your point of view and your authority in the industry, where it's almost like an extension to your resume these days, right? A lot of people, especially when you become more senior in your position, if you are a manager of any type, I can name probably a good half a dozen or dozen blogs from employees that they started on their own when I was at BMC, right? So these are people who just want to talk more about what they do at work every day, and their industry and their products, and have a space that's a little bit distanced from their official role at the employer. And that way, you own that content, you own that thought leadership, and that you can carry that on with you to your next employer as well. So I would say the number one thing is start a blog, start a website. And if you don't have the technical know-how, there's a lot of really easy to use tools for starting a blog. Check out WordPress.com. Check out GoDaddy for hosting services, or even just using LinkedIn's own publisher, the LinkedIn Pulse option. If you click on it's not the write a post or upload an image. It's that third button. If you click on that, you can really kind of write your own blog post within LinkedIn, and that goes out to all of your LinkedIn network. So at the very least, do that. Put out some kind of content maybe every month or every couple months, just to stay on everyone's radar. And really, it helps to build your network. It helps to get your point of view out there. It helps to establish your own thought leadership and how you can kind of be elevated within your industry by having a point of view out there that's different. So that's my number one tip to anyone out there searching, is really take a look at that blog.
Great. Well, Eric, thank you for joining us today. Where can people go to learn more about you and what you do?
Sure. Go to erictong.com. That's ERIC, 2 T's, UNG.com, or look up #HireEric on Facebook, LinkedIn, or Twitter.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Eric, and thank you for you listener joining us today on the Workology podcast, where we discuss the science and art of the workplace HR and recruitment. This is Jessica Miller Merrill, and until next time, you can visit Blogging for Jobs to listen to all our previous Workology podcast episodes.
Production services for the Workology podcast with Jessica Miller Merrill provided by TotalPicture.com.